Warning! Warning!
Today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dee Dee Pfeiffer, and you're listening to Then Is Now podcast.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
What kind of a sick school is this?
Uh-oh, Dongo!
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
You got spunk. I hate spunk.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger!
Oh, righty then.
How you doing?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Stand up to my little friend!
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
What are you people? On dope?
Stop whining.
I got a crap on deck that can choke a donkey.
Who is your daddy?
I'm sorry, but all questions must be submitted in writing.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Can I do that?
I'll be back.
A dynamite! Show me the money!
Don't! Up your nose with your rubber hose.
A what?
I'm sailing! I'm sailing!
Groovy.
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
Is looking at you, kid.
We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off.
Come to the coast and get together, have a few laughs.
Hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
I love it when a plan comes together.
What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to
11, exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
We're on a mission from God.
Hello and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Then Is Now podcast. I am your host, Ruggero, and have an amazing guest with me today. Now, folks, before we begin, I do need to explain to you a technical issue that we had with this episode. My guest and I actually recorded this in January of this year, 2021, and we had a technical issue with one of the audio files which got corrupted. However, after all this time, I have been able to fix it. It's not 100%, but it sounds much better than it originally did. So if you do hear any slight buzzing once in a while, or if my guest's voice sounds a little hollow, it's not your device, it's in the audio file. But I think it sounds great, so on with the show. Today, we are going to discuss a film called Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man from 1976, directed by the notorious Ruggero Deodato. If you're just tuning in for the first time, Then Is Now is the podcast in which we not only discuss pop culture of the past and how it relates to the present, but we also want to help people introduce young people to all the cool stuff they may have missed out on. There are so many things that today's generation has either forgotten or doesn't even know about, so it's our job to spread the word about these things. European cinema, particularly that from the 60s to the 80s, has been in our drive-in theaters, our Grindhouse theaters, and even on TV, but there's so much it's hard to know where to begin. Over on the East Meets the West podcast, we're tackling spaghetti westerns from Italy and even the Shaw Brothers films from Hong Kong. Over here on Then Is Now, we're going to tackle other European genres that you may not know about but are worth watching. There's Italian horror, British horror, Euro trash, and Euro crime films, just to name a few, which we will definitely cover on this show. But there's also something called Poliziotteschi, a subgenre of crime and action films that emerged in Italy in the late 60s and reached the height of their popularity in the 70s. They're also known as Poliziotteschi all'Italiana, Eurocrime, Italo-crime, spaghetti crime films, or simply Italian crime films. So sit back and listen to me and my special surprise guest as we discuss Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man. Class is in session.
I have a bad feeling about this.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Food fight!
Hey, you in my class?
I am today.
I think you should consider transferring to shop class. Now, very few students are severely injured in shop class.
Bueller.
When you were in school,
Bueller.
did you ever cut class?
Bueller.
Yeah, I guess I did. Sure, most kids cut classes.
Good, sign this. He's sick.
I get so lonely when I hear that third attendance bell ring and all my kids are not here.
7 years of college down the drain.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
You lack discipline. As long as I'm here, there will be no grades or gold stars or demerits. We're gonna have recess all the time. Woo! Go, play, and have fun now.
Folks, I can't tell you how excited and honored I am to have today's guest joining us. I think the chloroform is wearing off, so now I can tell you about him. This is the first time he's been on Then Is Now. He's a blogger, podcaster, and film commentator, and has done audio commentary, often with his co-host Troy Gwynn, for not one, but two Paul Naschy Blu-ray collections, the first of which received honorable mention in the much-coveted Rondo Awards, as well as audio commentary for such Blu-rays as Tintorera, The Tiger Shark, The Beast and the Magic Sword, Blood Ceremony, The Lorelei's Grasp, Inquisition, and The Killer of Dolls, as well as the standard DVD version of Paul Naschy's Panic Beats. He's written articles for magazines such as Cinema Retro and Scream, as well as writing his own blog, The Bloody Pit of Rod, which are his meandering thoughts on movies old and new. He's also the host of not one, but two wildly popular podcasts, The Bloody Pit, an existential extension of his blog described as eclectic film discussion and babble, and hands down the greatest podcast on the subject of Paul Naschy and Spanish horror with his co-host Troy Gwynn, the Naschycast. Please welcome to the show one of the best podcasters out there and virtuoso of all things, Paul Naschy, Mr. Rod Barnett.
Wow, I when you lay it all out like that, it sounds like I might have done something. Thank you. Thank you. Like a sad Grinch, my ego just grew 3 sizes.
Oh, there you go. So today we are introducing you, the listener, to Poliziotteschi, aka Italian crime films. Rod, on this show, one thing I should mention is that we like to introduce people to cool stuff from the past that they may have missed out on, and Poliziotteschi is one of those things. Can you elaborate a little on what exactly that is?
Certainly, man. First of all, they're basically police procedural or police crime and action films made in Italy. Generally, I mean, it gets a little, sometimes people will say it kind of started in the 60s and then went through the 70s and into the 80s, but I always associate it primarily with the 1970s. They're always involve cops, sometimes vigilantes, and one of the hallmarks of a good one is that you're always aware that the villains are some of the scummiest scumbags that have ever scummed across the screen.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's true. I mean, these things are they're crime movies or cop movies, kind of amped up just as far as they could take them in the 1970s, and a lot of that kind of grew out of the political turmoil that was going on in Italy in the 70s. It was a really, really brutal time. There was a lot of terrorism in the country, and the general population felt really under threat almost all the time, to the point where there was a certain level of paranoia and a willingness and a desire to see kind of the police take extreme measures. Now, of course, a lot of this grew out of, as far as the film genre or subgenre that we're talking about here, kind of grew out of watching what was going on in a lot of Hollywood films, as you would expect from any exploitation genre that centers in Italy. So you had them looking at films like Dirty Harry or Bullet, and then eventually, of course, in 1974, you're talking about Death Wish, where you're watching the law being taken not just into vigilante hands, but you're having the cops acting almost as a kind of execution squad at times.
Right.
And that plays very heavily into this subgenre. It's one of the things that makes it really, really interesting to talk about because they are primarily exciting procedural / action movies. Sometimes they teeter over into being just action movies. And this one, the one we're going to be talking about in detail today, I would say really kind of does teeter into being really, really, really an action movie more than it is anything else because there's no, the cops may be looking for, the big bad guy, but that is not the real focus of the movie as it jets forward on the back of a motorcycle as you barely hang on. The joy of these things is what you're watching most of the time is a cop who's barely a step or two away from being a criminal himself, and that adds a lot of area for fun to discuss these movies because it does become a question of something that these movies were often accused of, which is kind of being fascist in nature, the same way Dirty Harry kind of was accused of that as well. And it's very easy to see that in these movies because we are talking about, the power of the state in the form of sometimes not just regular police, but most of the time actually plainclothes policemen who are wielding deadly force willy-nilly at times in ways that, as I'm sure we'll talk about later on, in ways that really kind of seem to put the public in as much danger as the criminals do. It gets a little crazy. Now, these movies were known for a fair amount of graphic violence. One of the ways that they were allowed to get away with this, of course, was that you could pretend, and I'm sure some of the people making these were not pretending, but you could pretend that these are morality tales. You could pretend that you're showing how bad things can be, and that that makes the depiction of some of these things on screen perfectly okay because we're saying, "My God, isn't this horrible?" But generally, of course, it's really there. You can say that, but at the end of the day, these are exploitation films. These are movies being made to get butts on seats and to make a profit. And what you do is you amp up the exploitable stuff, and you make people excited to see whatever it is you're presenting. And these, if you like action-filled cop movies, and you've never gone back into the 70s and checked any of these kind of movies out, I suggest that you're going to have fun as long as you're willing to, not be too worried about the fact that cop, mowing down people probably shouldn't be pulling the trigger quite so often as he is.
Right. Well, that's great. So today's film is Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man from 1976. And it was directed, of course, by the infamous, nay, notorious Ruggero Deodato. And it's been considered a cautionary tale of power.
You're surrounded now. Give yourselves up. There's no way to escape. Come on out. Be sensible. Why make your situation worse? Surrender.
Give me a car, and I'll blow this thing, and fast!
Think of the lives we're endangering.
I see that. You would like to avoid it. You hate to see this happening. If you risk any lives, they're your own. I admire your bravery, but I can't intervene.
I'm growing less and less satisfied with you two. As often as your missions are successful, the net results include 2 or 3 cadavers butchered beyond recognition.
There's a plan to rob a jewelry shop in Piazza Bologna tomorrow. A pair of well-known professionals.
Ciao, rookies. In 1 hour, I'm back Pasquini.
We'll come help you. We're off duty.
Roberto Pasquini, alias Beebe. Rick Coney, in 1 hour, is splitting your skull.
Whether you push it or stuff yourself with heroin, I don't give a damn. If I see you picking up stakes in one of my gambling joints, I'll pay you. But you go tell the police and you don't get no more. You ever hear any talk about a special squad?
I know quite a bit about that. For example, I know that Rick Conte you had filled full of lead was on the special squad.
From now on, I'm restricting you. You're assigned exclusively to Pasquini.
Where's Bibi?
He's screwing your mother.
Lena, you're wrong. He's not screwing my mother.
When I woke this morning, my thoughts were just for you. And I started to wonder who you are right now.
They work as a pair. I know they were the same pair who hit the car park. You gotta spot them.
When you were tested for the special squad, every test revealed that your traits are criminal.
But that's what you need to fight crime.
Yeah. What I can't explain is why you two, with your characteristics, applied for the police at all.
Alfredo and Antonio, the members of an elite special squad in Rome, whose existence is only known to a few, do not arrest offenders. They kill them. The two ruthless cops devote themselves to hunting Roberto Pasquini, a.k.a. Bibi, a ferocious criminal and owner of gambling dens who, for 5 years, has slipped through their fingers with the help of a corrupt inspector. Finally, after killing 4 of his henchmen, Alfredo and Antonio discover Bibi's secret hideout. However, they are caught by the villain and would have ended up dead if it weren't for the timely intervention of their boss. So, Rod, when did you first see this, and what was your first impression?
Well, the first time I saw it was, watch me date myself, on videotape, a bootleg videotape back in the 90s. And
wow.
Yeah. That's the last time I saw it until about 2 weeks ago when I sat down and watched it on DVD. Not that I didn't want to revisit the movie. It's just that over the course of time, VHS tape has a tendency to go away.
Right. Degrade.
Well, and not just that. There came a point when I transferred as much videotape as possible to DVD-R and then got rid of them. And now, of course, I have huge amounts of DVD-Rs that rarely get revisited.
Right.
So, in a strange way, even though certain sequences had kind of stuck in my memory, we'll talk about those as we go. In a lot of ways, it was almost like watching it for the first time.
Yeah, like I mentioned to you when we were first talking about discussing this film about like 2 or 3 months ago, I got an email from Kino promoting the film, and I had never heard of it. And I swear to God, when I read the description, my debit card just leaped out of my wallet and made the purchase before I even knew what was going on.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I was promised ultra-violence, and I wasn't disappointed. It was just the combination of Ruggero Deodato and the Italian crime film. I had to have it. So I did watch it then when I first got it, and then that's when I called you up, and I was like, hey, let's talk about this movie. So I'm excited to talk about this today.
Well, with Deodato as the director, just out of curiosity, I mean, how many of his movies have you seen?
Honestly, I've only seen, let's see, I've seen a few. I've seen House on the Edge of the Park, of course, Cannibal Holocaust,
yeah.
And I believe The Barbarians. I'm sure I saw that one. So I haven't seen some of his other films, which I need to get into.
Well, I have to admit, this is not something that I'd done until just a few days ago, but I took a list at his list of credits and realized that I have seen most of his feature films.
That's awesome.
Which I honestly didn't think that I would be able to say that. I have seen Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man, Jungle Holocaust, Cannibal Holocaust, House on the Edge of the Park, Atlantis Interceptors. There's a better title for that movie, of course.
Right.
Cut and Run, Body Count, The Barbarians, Phantom of Death, Dial Help, and then after that he started working primarily in television, and so I haven't seen much of that stuff at all. But I realized that is a long list of movies, and I've seen most of them. And one other, his 1975 film Waves of Lust, is a DVD sitting on my shelf waiting for me to put it into a player anytime now.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I was not. I honestly thought that there were probably 3 or 4 more cop movies that he had made in the 70s that I had not seen yet, and it's strange to learn that really this one is it.
Yeah. And he was a big fan of TV cop shows, so that's why in this movie it kind of looks like a rated R version of Starsky and Hutch, you know?
Yeah, very much. A very hard R,
Yeah. You know, one thing I found out too about him that was interesting was he was the sole director for 2 weeks of exterior shooting in Madrid for Corbucci's Django in '65, which I did not know that.
Yeah, he was the assistant. He was listed I think he's listed as the assistant director or second assistant or something like that. But yeah, he worked on Django pretty extensively. There's some you can see, there's some behind the scenes stills. You see him with Corbucci and with Franco Nero, and he's talked about in different interviews how, to a large degree, Corbucci was one of his mentors and one of the people he learned from, and part of that learning process, which was pretty common in the Italian film industry, was just being thrown in at the deep end to see if he could swim. And apparently some of that is true on Django as well, where he was just tasked with certain things and luckily was able to do them. So.
That's awesome. There's one movie he did in what was it? I think '93 that looks interesting, and I want to try and seek that out. It's called The Washing Machine.
Yeah, I've not seen that myself.
That looks interesting. I like you said, I've got to go back through and watch more of his films because I really enjoyed this one. It just his skill with the camera, and not only with the camera, but just in being able to infuse these different themes into the movie, just really struck home with me.
Well, that's the thing is, if for a lot of people, especially people who are interested in genre or exploitation films from Europe, the minute you mention Deodato, most people are going to focus in on the big one, which is Cannibal Holocaust, and that's completely understandable because it is a legendary, controversial film for many reasons. And the thing is, though, as time goes by, that one incredible accomplishment, no matter what you feel about it, does tend to overshadow everything else that he did. And of course, he kind of he can be called at fault for that a little himself, considering that the movie. He when you've got a movie that notorious on your resume, using it as a calling card is a good idea. I mean, you don't make Cannibal Holocaust and then not get offered things like House on the Edge of the Park or Cut and Run.
Right.
So the notoriety of that movie, I don't know if it hurt him or helped him. I know it had to help him to a certain degree to be that well known because of the controversy around the movie, but it does overshadow everything.
Yeah, I think so. And he also, one of the things that I learned too was I didn't realize it when I saw it at the time. He had a cameo in Hostel 2 as the Italian cannibal, which I thought was a great homage to the whole Cannibal Holocaust thing.
True, very true.
So we've got the writer is Fernando De Leo, and he wrote some of his top movies that he's written are Naked Violence, The Boss, Caliber 9, and a film called To Be 20. Do you know anything about Fernando?
I know that I absolutely love his crime movies. I think that he was one of the best of the script writers for these things. The way I kind of bend a knee and kind of bow in the direction of people like Dardando Scischetti, whose name I think I just hideously butchered, the man who's responsible for about 20 of my favorite horror and gothic films from Italy in the 60s and 70s. The way I kind of bow to him as far as the crime movies are concerned, if you're talking about Fernando De Leo, you're talking about someone who just seemed to not be able to make a misstep. It's as if he's that chef in the kitchen who you could just call back for any recipe, and he'll deliver just a sumptuous feast 30 minutes later. It's astonishing.
Absolutely. And so for our cast, we've got Ray Lovelock as Tony. He's the blonde guy. He sang both songs. I think he wrote Maggie, which was the opening song, and then he sang the other one, which escapes me at the moment. But I just liked how it had that sort of, it was just sort of a folksy kind of song and added an interesting dimension to the film.
Well, it's a great juxtaposition because what you're dealing with is a very action-filled and violent movie about some, pretty, if you stare at them straight in the face, they're pretty downbeat and depressing. But that having those songs under it, it elevates it and changes the tone just enough to keep it from being something that you just kind of want to constantly turn away from.
Yeah, absolutely. He was actually in Fiddler on the Roof, which I thought was interesting.
Yes. Well, the thing about Ray Lovelock is he's one of those guys who there are some actors some Italian actors from this period that you look at them and you just, as a guy, you kind of want to hate them because they're fucking beautiful. I mean, they're gorgeous, good-looking men. They're handsome. They're virile. Everything about them is these are the people that you want to be when you see them on screen. And what you hope against hope is that maybe they suck as actors. Then you can feel a little bit of superiority over them, right?
Right.
But no, he's actually good. And that just makes it worse because he's so good. I can't take my eyes off of him when he's on screen. He's really talented. He's been in some movies. He's been in several movies that I think are simply phenomenal. Queens of Evil is absolutely fantastic. Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, which is just, it's a work of genius, and he is central to it. He has a great role in the fantastic crime film Violent City. Oh my goodness. He's just, like I say, I take a look at him and I think to myself, I need him to not be good. He's too handsome, and he's actually good.
And he looks like Robert Redford, I thought.
To a degree, yeah. I can see some people definitely looking at the two of them and thinking, hey, Ray Lovelock might be more handsome.
Yeah. Oh man. And then we got Mark Perrell, who played what was his name? Oh, Fred. That's right. He was Fred. And I remembered him actually from The Psychic. I forgot that he was in that. That was really good.
Well, his career, I've run into him in a number of different films as well. And what's weird for me is there's something about his face where I don't remember him until I see his name. I don't remember having seen him in something else. And then I look at his list of credits and I realize, oh, I've seen him in just so many things. He's in, famously, he's in a couple of movies that I hold up as just astonishing classics. The Road to Selena from 1970, which is an amazingly good film. He's got a role in, and then there's Don't Torture a Duckling from Lucio Fulci, which is one of Fulci's best films in my opinion, and he has a central role in that, and he's quite good in it. And then of course later for Fulci also, as you mentioned, The Psychic. But like I say, and I have to mention, a sleazy little piece of Italian exploitation known as The Sister of Ursula. He has a role in.
Okay.
And if you've not seen The Sister of Ursula, it's not a film that I would recommend to everybody. But if you're willing to deal with sleaze and kink, go check out Sister of Ursula from 1978. And
okay.
That's just all I'll say. But like I say, he's one of those guys who's good every time I see him. It's just that I don't know what it is about his face, but it just slips from my memory until I see his name on screen.
Right. He died young, though. He was 34, which I was surprised to find out.
Yeah. I can't remember what the circumstances were around that, but it's clear he died way too young.
Yeah, which is too bad. And then the one that took me a second. I was watching it the first time around, about 3/4 of the way through, like the boss, Adolfo Celli. I'm like, I know him from something, and then finally dawned on me he was Largo in Thunderball.
Oh, well, yeah. That's one of my favorite things about this, and it's just a joy when this happens, is when you'll find somebody who is primarily known to American audiences for playing a villain in a Hollywood movie, and in Italian movies in Euro cult cinema, they are playing, sometimes good guys, sometimes they're playing cops, sometimes they're playing mayors or just whatever. And so you have that particular actor who is our cop's boss, and is he's a good guy. He really is a good guy. It reminds me of when I run across Gert Frobe, the actor who played the German actor who played Goldfinger.
Yep.
he'll turn up in half a dozen films here and there, and it's just like, oh, he's just a working actor doing all kinds of things. He's not actually Goldfinger. That's right.
Right.
We come from the retro future. We want you to be nostalgic for what's to come. A new channel and distribution network for smart people with bad taste, featuring content from Church of the Subgenius, Creature Features, Cinema, Insomnia, Sleazy P. Martini and Guar, Troma, Corey Maccabee, horror, sci-fi, Saturday morning cartoons, midnight movies, and assorted trash we love. Add our channel OSI 74 to your Roku player or visit OSI74.com. All systems go.
And then we got Franco Chiti, who was Rudy, who kind of dies early on in the film. But one of the things that I noticed that he was in was The Godfather.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to have to go back and watch that again because I didn't remember him from that.
Well, that sounds like some horrible work to have to do, to go back and watch The Godfather.
I know. Another excuse to watch it. Oh, man. So then we go through the cast here. One thing I thought was interesting was that the character of Norma, who was the secretary, that was Silvia Dionisio, and she was Deodato's wife in real life.
Right. And quite a lovely lady, and I think she really has some great chemistry with Lovelock and Burrell. I think they do a good job. I think those scenes with them are really funny and cool.
Right, absolutely. And it's funny too because she pushes back, like they're like, all over her, and she just gives it right back to them.
Oh, I know. I mean, the whole question, and they're very upfront about it, is like, which one of us will you have sex with first? And
right.
Her extremely brilliant way of putting them in their place, but without really actually closing the door to having some kind of sexual, liaison with either, one of them or both of them, is just really well played. And I was really, let's put it this way, I was not expecting that because there's a long, thin. Well, okay, no, there's a long, thick line of misogyny that tends to run through these films because it's just a part of the way a lot of these quote unquote badass characters are written for these kinds of stories. And the fact that they have absolutely no intention of forcing this woman to do anything, they're just trying to talk her into going to bed with them.
Right. Even as a threesome, they don't care.
Yeah, they'd be perfectly happy with that because she is very attractive.
Absolutely. Then we've got Renato Salvatore, who played Roberto Pasquini, also known as BB. And one thing I found interesting about him was that he was a former teen idol in the 50s, and he was considered one of the most underrated actors in Italian cinema.
Well, now that I did not know. That's good to know. I'm not shocked by it because he's quite good at this.
Right. So, was there anybody else in the cast that stood out to you?
Honestly, as you go along, there are a couple of character actors that they have those faces that if you watch enough Italian exploitation cinema from the 60s and 70s, you go, man, I know I've seen that person. Oh man, I know I've seen that person somewhere before.
Yep.
And I can't place them, and then they're not in the movie long enough for you to hold on to the desire to figure it out, and they just slide on by. So.
Right. So we can dive into the film a little bit here now. Obviously, I'd like to mention that one of the alternate titles for the UK home video was The Terminators, which I guess that works. This was pre Arnold Terminator, so.
Oh well, yeah. I mean that's I know that's all that anybody can think of now because of the massive success of that particular film. But I absolutely love various retitling. There's sometimes movies they get odd titles that honestly, it's just sometimes it feels like pure absolute chance as to what we're going to end up thinking of a film. Thinking what title we're going to associate it with, and generally, of course, it's going to be whatever title you first see the movie under. But more and more these days, especially over the past 10 to 20 years with the advent of digital video, the film will be marketed under its most well-known title, and then the print on the screen will be of a different title.
Right.
And so there's some movies that I don't have that kind of association with, but it seems to me that a lot of the retitling of this are just kind of variations on Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man, which honestly I can't think of a better title for a film like this.
Absolutely. I think even Tarantino had said that this was one of the greatest titles of a film ever.
Oh, I would have to agree, and it's actually an excellent example of the genre in a lot of ways.
If I understand it correctly, the script itself, when Fernando first wrote it, it was "Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Cop." So I'm glad they changed it to "Die Like a Man" because that just has a little bit more oomph to it, you know.
Yeah. It wouldn't have the same. But although I could imagine just shortening it, and deciding to call it "Die Like a Cop."
Right.
That would be interesting. Yeah.
But then the main characters would have to die.
Well, yeah. From what I was led to understand, one of the original ideas for the title was "Born a Cop, Die a Cop." So
right.
That would be. I can see that, but at the same time, once again, live like a cop, die like a man. That's to me that has the sound of someone cracking open a can of 1970s bad domestic beer. Clink.
Right. Oh man, that's too funny. You know, one of the other titles, it was released on the U.S. and Italian DVD, was Raro, R-A-R-O.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite understand what that was, but apparently the Italian DVD version has no end credits. So
that was true. That was true of some films at times. I don't know why, and I also don't know why that would. Although I have heard certain tales about the cheapness of certain distributors, where they would. Well, let's put it this way: depending on the length of your film, the actual running time, there would be more film that would need to be in a canister, and if it were over a certain running time, you would need a whole other canister to have all the reels of a film delivered to a theater. So if there was some way to shorten the film down so that you could get away with not having to send, say, as many canisters to each theater to show your movie, you might do it.
Right, that makes sense. So one of the things too, these guys are in what's called the Special Squad, and in my research I found that it's considered a subgenre of Poliziotteschi.
Yeah.
Have you heard that? Are there like a lot of movies similar to this where there are just special squads where they're licensed to kill?
Well, there's one that I could think of just that goes right along with the idea of what these guys are set up to be, which is 38 Special Squad.
Okay.
Which is, by the way, a really good one because. Well, I won't give it away, but let's just say it's a pretty action-filled movie, and it does focus on another special unit inside the police that are kind of given certain loose parameters of what they're allowed to do, and the reason for the title is they actually pack these particular 38s that are essentially considered not. They're not generally permissible for the police to carry. And so there's a particular car stunt in that movie that I will never forget watching for the first time and then backing the film up 4 times and calling my girlfriend into the room and going, you just got to see this. You're just not going to believe this. So it is, I don't know how many of them there are. I don't know how much, if you want to call it a subcategory of these type of films, I guess that's possible. But that's the only one that comes to mind that I'm aware of where you're talking about people who aren't just thought of as detectives or working in homicide or working in whatever division. So yeah.
Right. And when the film was first released, I guess the censorship commission didn't like the part where Pasquini gouges the guy's eye out and then squishes it under his heel.
Yeah, that's I don't think you're going to find that footage. And they did away with that. And of course, it's the scene as it plays in the movie is still pretty rough.
Oh, but, yeah.
When you listen to an interview with Deodato talking about his kind of joy in pushing the boundaries as hard as he was with that scene and not being all that shocked at it getting cut out, it reminds me a lot of stay with me. There's a famous story about Martin Scorsese's film Casino, where there's a sequence in the movie, if you've ever seen it, where Joe Pesci's character has got some guy he's squeezing for information, and he's got his head in a vice and is squeezing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they filmed it with this guy because they just describe it. They just have Pesci describe what happens as he like sneeringly walks away from the situation. But they actually filmed the special effect with this guy's eye actually being popped out of his head by the vice.
Oh, wow.
But of course, Scorsese knew that this was how he was going to get. He was going to use this over-the-top sequence to get away with keeping other scenes of violence in the movie in there when he submitted it to the MPAA.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's just like I say. It's with a lot of directors, they can get surprised by the censors taking offense to what they put on screen. And then there are times when, if you're smart enough, you're realizing, I'm probably going to have to take this out, but it'll allow me to get away. I can use it as a chit to get away with something else.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if that was Deodato's planned that for just that reason.
Hard to know, but considering how much violence is in the movie, if he thought that far ahead, he was being smart.
Yeah. And of course, what I love is how the movie just opens up with you get a little bit of credits and the peaceful music, and then it just jumps right into the action scene of the motorcycle chase.
Yep.
And I just love that because I remember when I first watched it, I was like, all right, now I know what I'm in for. This is going to be great.
Well, I have a question for you though.
Sure.
Like I said, going back and rewatching this after so long a period of time, this was kind of like watching it for the first time. My question to you is, there was a moment right after the credits are finished, and we're watching these two, the guys who end up being our two main characters, who are riding on a motorcycle to a specific place, and then are sitting across the street watching something that's about to happen. There was a moment when I wasn't sure if they were going to be the cops or the bad guys.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there really was, and I wasn't sure how this movie was going to play out, and I think that I mean, not to give too much credit to Deodato, let's put this in the lap of the scriptwriter at the same time, because I think that's intentional, because the movie does go way out of its way to make you understand that there's not much dividing the way they do what they're doing as cops from what these criminals are doing.
Yeah, it wasn't until when I first watched it, when Fred snapped the guy's neck at the end of the motorcycle chase, that I started to question it. I was like, wait a minute. I thought these guys were supposed to be the cops because their pictures were on the front of the thing, so I kind of knew that they were going to be the cops.
Yep.
But I was just shocked. I was like, oh crap, what the hell's going on here?
Exactly.
And that whole sequence, it was directed by a guy named Gilberto Galimberti. He was what was called the Master of Arms. That's his list in the credits, which is basically the guy who coordinates the weapons or whatever. And he did, guerrilla directed that whole sequence. I don't think they even got permits to do that.
Oh yeah, they're very clear about the fact that they all said similar things, because this was not a few years ago where they were talking to a lot of the people involved in making the movie, and they flat out said, yeah, we'd never be able to shoot those sequences where we're riding the motorcycles up and down those staircases. I said, of course, at the time, we just went out and did it without getting any permits or anything like that, and then got away as quickly as we could before the real police could show up and tell us to stop. So.
Right. One thing I really love, too, about these movies particularly, especially the ones like this that are just filmed, they're so visually beautiful. They're like time capsules where, you could see Rome, how it looked in the 70s, and you feel like you're there. And I love that. And have you ever been to Rome?
Oh, Lord, no, I wish I had. The only time I've ever been able to spend in Europe at all was I was able to spend a couple of weeks when I was 18. I was able to spend a couple of weeks with a crew of other students in Paris and northern France.
Okay.
Basically, being very happy about the drinking age and going to different places.
That's awesome.
Which was great. I mean, going to Paris at the time, I had just enough knowledge of the French language to be able to not be thought of as a scumbag American who couldn't speak any French at all, and going up in the Eiffel Tower at night, which was a truly gorgeous. I mean, just a gorgeous view, just astonishing to see the city of lights laid out underneath you. But That's the only time I've ever been able to get to Europe. I have. I'm happy to say I have open invitations from a number of people in a couple of different countries, but I haven't been able to get back over there since.
Well, interesting. That's awesome, but you got to get over there. But Rome especially, and it's funny because the reason I asked you that is I went about 7 years ago when I was married. I went with my wife and kids, and we went and visited family over there that I have, and Rome today is vastly different in some ways than is depicted in this film, and the thing that I noticed the most that was the difference is in this film you've got a lot of different sized cars and trucks everywhere. You've got Mercedeses and all different types of vehicles. Nowadays they're all small cars. I was there for 2 weeks and I only saw one SUV, and they drive so crazy. I was literally in a building looking out the window at all these cars, and it's cars and mopeds everywhere because the streets are so narrow, and it was almost like this beautiful ballet. I was amazed at how these cars and mopeds, they're zipping around so fast. I was so shocked that nobody got killed or maimed or anything.
Well, I mean, that does not surprise me. Although, I mean, a lot of that. I would see a lot of that as good, as far as keeping the car sizes small, simply because there's no way to make those avenues and streets any wider. So,
right.
They're going to be the size they are no matter what you do. And yeah, there are times. For instance, there's a scene early on in the film where one cop who's essentially a plainclothes cop, who seems to be kind of undercover slightly. Steps outside, is about to get into his car, and then is gunned down. And he falls next to the car he was about to get into. And I hate to say this, but I look at the size of the car, and I think, could that guy have folded himself into that car?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's like, my God, he's about a 6 foot tall guy, and I'm looking at that car and thinking he's. I mean, that's like a freaking go-kart, but that's what some of them are. And there's a part of me that wonders. There's a couple of reasons you might have your main characters when you're in an action movie like this running around on motorcycles. First reason, motorcycles are cooler than cars when you're talking about action sequences. So, okay, right. But the second would be, does it really kind of emasculate these guys to be folding themselves into these square little tiny boxes?
Right.
I don't know if that's a visual component of why they were making those choices, but in this film, it's definitely motorcycles only for our heroes.
How cool can you look in a Volvo chasing after the bad guys,
Precisely. How many Kia badasses do you know?
Right. But these guys, it was just a great way of, the whole sequence was a great way of illustrating how these characters are, because they're riding over other cars. I think it was Fred was crashing through the cafe. Yep. They almost killed people on their own.
Well, that's just it. Like I say, once once you see the purse snatchers and that they're chasing the purse snatchers, your brain immediately snaps into, okay, well, they're the cops. They're going after these scumbags. But you're immediately confronted by the fact that these guys are reckless lunatics.
Yeah.
What the hell are they doing? I mean, I understand you want them to get these guys because they seem to have just killed that poor lady. But,
right. Oh, that was horrible, too.
Yeah.
She was chained to her purse, which I thought was interesting.
Well, I thought that was incredibly odd, but I did a little reading, and it does seem that, during this period of time, there was so much crime going on in the cities in Italy, especially in Rome, that people were taking weird measures, and some of it would be. I mean, turns out that that's probably not a really great idea, but it's a bizarre early version of lunatics with wallet chains,
right,
things like that, where they think this is going to stop somebody from taking it from them, and it's like, in this case, this lady dies because of it.
Right. They smashed her head. They're dragging her into the lamppost. It's
pretty rough.
It's not funny, but it was just like, thinking about it, like, oh my God.
Oh, I know. And it's one of the, honestly, when they start dragging her, there's this part of your mind that immediately thinks, okay, well, the bags, whatever's holding her arm onto it is going to snap. And then it doesn't. And she's dead.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because the villains. We're still setting it up here at this beginning part of the movie. We don't really know how violent the cops are, but the villains are so bad because they do that to the lady, and then the poor blind guy's crossing the street with his dog, and they run the dog over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is the quickest way. And I hate to say this about our species, but it's true. The quickest way to get human beings pissed off at you is to injure an animal.
Right.
We are, you can do all kinds of crazy ass things to people, and there's just something in our brains that make us think, well, they might have done something to deserve that. But you injure an animal, and everybody stands up and is ready to start hitting you with a stick.
Right. And I think therein lies the difference, ultimately, when you look back at the film, between the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys, they resort to violence. They'll kill the bad guys, but they're not vile. Like, the villains are just despicable in this movie.
And sometimes that, in these films especially, sometimes it can get to the point where the villains are so bad, so freaking over the top, awful, that it becomes slightly unbelievable. It becomes the kind of thing where your suspension of disbelief kind of gets away from you at times. I will point to a particular movie called Almost Human that falls into this category, at least for me, where I think it's an excellent movie, but it is absolutely, there comes a point where you start to think, I don't know if any human being could be as vile as the bad guy in this movie. I mean, he's played by Henry Silva, and Henry Silva.
Okay, yeah.
And Henry Silva can play without a doubt the truly despicable characters. Whether he's playing, he seems to be despicable whether he's playing a good guy or a bad guy. To be honest with you,
that's true.
And in Almost Human, it's that point where it's not that the film becomes a parody or comedic or in any way, but the character Silva plays in the movie is so vile. It's kind of hard to deal with.
That was Almost Human. There's I saw that he was in a bunch of these Poliziotteschi movies.
Yes, he was. And he's always someone you can count on to kind of anchor the film. He's somebody who there's something about, there's some actors who, they may not be like the greatest actors in the world, and I'm not trying to denigrate Henry Silva. I'm just saying some actors have something that the camera loves, and he's one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And these guys, Fred and Tony, man, they enjoy shooting and killing and destroying. They're always smiling when they're doing it.
Well, I mean, I'm reminded of a line from a police comedy called Running Scared from the late 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Where one cop asked the other, he says, "Hey, come on, man, what other job they let you shoot people?"
That's so true. Oh my God. And it's funny too, because I kind of knew something was up with the boss when he's talking to them, and he's kind of, I don't know, lackadaisically reprimanding them about their tactics.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. I always have to friggin' turn things around on the paperwork and stuff. Yep. And it was just like, it was like with a wink and a nod, he really wasn't reprimanding them. He was enjoying what they were doing. But then he asks them, are you, why aren't you guys criminals? You'd be so good at it.
which, like I say, the film makes sure you get that message repeatedly, that these guys, if you have any questions about whether or not the other people around them are aware of how close to the line they stride, then the movie makes sure that you're aware that those other characters see it for what it is. But
right.
It's it is that question of what do you say when it comes down to something like that? How do you respond in a way that doesn't make you feel as if you're being suckered automatically in a way?
Right. And it's just funny too how these guys are, because like I said, they love shooting and destroying and killing, and they love fucking, and they don't have any romantic aspirations anywhere. It's just another thing that they do.
And that is one thing that the movie doesn't really. Okay, let's tick off a few strange bullet points about our two main characters. These two cops who are undercover cops who are sometimes sent out by their boss with plausible deniability to do some things that are probably not something that any supervisor should ever send a cop out to do. Let's tick off a few strange things about these guys. One, they're partners, they're cop partners. Two, they live together in the same apartment.
Right.
They sleep in the same house, in the same room, with just 2 different beds. And by the way, they're not big beds. These are single beds. These are twin beds. These are small beds that really would only be comfortable for one person. Then they have a cleaning lady who comes in and apparently cooks and does some cleaning for them, who's been doing this for a long time. So you kind of have this mother figure who's there for both of them, even though they harass the hell out of her. And,
and she totally despises them.
Right. There seems to be absolutely no ability for these two guys to have a jealous bone in their body where the other guy is concerned. They're not worried about there are no petty jealousies about women in between them. They're more than willing to share or trade back and forth different women. They don't care.
Yep.
The strange thing about this is the next step for me, thinking about the way these two guys are played out in the movie, is that there's either an unspoken between the two of them, or an unspoken to us, the audience, understanding between these two guys that they don't think they're going to live very long doing the job they're doing.
Oh, okay.
It just feels that way. And there's a part of me that wishes that the script had added a little something in there that gave us an indication that these guys thought down that road a little bit. But then, because that just seems to me, I mean, come on, you're partners, you live together, you basically they're together 24/7.
Right.
And it's clear that there doesn't. A different film would a different film trying to make a different point would have extracted basically all the women in their lives that they just casually have sex with, and led you to believe that perhaps these two guys have some kind of homoerotic relationship going.
Right.
But the movie really doesn't point you in that direction at all. These guys just seem to be, really close friends who have this bond, and like I say, it just seems unspoken that maybe these guys really don't think that they're going to live a long life. And that may be one reason why, they have the relationships with women that they do. They're not.
Right. They don't make any permanent attachments.
Right. Why do that when it's not going to help anybody? It's not, we're just going to end up dead pretty quickly regardless. And that's just one thing that, it's one of the only things that I wish had been kind of added to the storyline, is kind of get a little bit more insight into these guys, because the movie walks you down that street a little bit when you find out about the way they live together. And it's really interesting because they don't have, it would be easy to add that aspect to it because of the violence that they live with just day in and day out doing their job.
Right. Yeah, just a simple line of dialogue here and there where, I'll never live long enough to see that anyways, something like that. And it's funny too, because I totally didn't get any homoerotic thing from it. I felt like they were brothers, even though they weren't blood related. I
kept waiting for there to be some line between the two of them, talking about how they knew each other as kids, or, they went to school together or something like that, to give you an idea of how these two guys are so in sync. Not that that can't happen, with people who meet as adults as well. But they could just, it just seems like there could have been just a little something in there to give us a little more insight into because they're showing us this weird living arrangement. So why not, take it a little step further and give us a little bit more insight into these two guys? Because in a way, they are kind of ciphers, and after a certain point, you kind of have to realize they're probably being presented that way for a reason. We don't want to know too much about them because they don't want other people to know too much about them.
Right. That's amazing. That's a great analysis. And the two actors have such chemistry together too, and the way the characters interact was, even beyond that. They speak in code sometimes.
Yeah.
Like after they torch the cars at the gambling den, they're in the house and the maid's in the house, so they're not talking about it openly. One guy's, I think it was Fred, was looking at the paper, and the other one's like, "Oh, did you see that theater opening? How was it?" And "Oh, it's hit the charts. Everybody's talking about it." And obviously he's referring to the news articles about them torching the cars.
Exactly, and it's because they don't want to. And like I say, it's hard to know whether if they're speaking in code about that because they're usually working with people who don't know they're cops in the first place, or if they just don't want to put this lady who works for them in a position of knowing something that could put her in a bad spot.
I think it's a little bit of both, because they never brag. They never say, "Oh, hey, I did an awesome job, jumping over those cars on my bike, and I love smashing through cafes." They don't ever brag about what they do. They just do it.
They also don't compliment each other on the accomplishments either. They just discuss them.
That's true, yeah. Another moment, too, where they spoke, what I thought was speaking in code, was when, first of all, the whole scene was insane, where they're in that, gully, and they've got cans lined up on both sides, and they're opposite each other, shooting what seems to be at each other, but they're shooting at the cans just out of range of the other guy's head.
Yep.
And while they're doing that, they notice that they're being spied on by bad guys. And he's like, I think it was, I forget which one it was, Fred or Tony. One of them says, "Did you see that rabbit?" And he's like, "I did." So they're so in sync all the time.
And like I say, there's so much to like about this movie, and there's the kind of unspoken relationship between these two guys, and how it's clear they've been doing this for years. It's clear that sequence there where it's a kind of target practice experiment, target practice scenario for them that they do to kind of keep themselves sharp.
Yeah.
This is something they've clearly done a half dozen times. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to get back to a point that you brought up earlier about how the boss kind of throws nuggets out there, and even though he doesn't want them to do it, he knows they're going to do it anyways. And one of the things that stuck out to me was when.
By the way, I wanted to, I'm sorry. I wanted to make amends for something. I forgot earlier. When I was talking about Almost Human, allow me to apologize. It's not Henry Silva who plays the bad guy. It's actually Thomas Milian.
Oh, okay.
So the great thing about that movie, in a weird way, is that Henry Silva, who is who can play such despicable characters.
Yeah.
And believe me, if you want to see him play a despicable character, watch the movie Cry of a Prostitute.
Oh, geez.
But it's Thomas Milian, the Cuban actor, who is without a doubt one of the most despicable human beings you're ever going to see on screen. I apologize for I don't know how I did that, but that's true. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Hey, no worries.
Sorry.
When the boss tells them that there was I don't know, I forget exactly what it was, but something was going to go down at a bar, but he tells them specifically, "Don't go there. We're going to have cops take care of it."
Yes.
And so they're like, "All right, well, we're going to go to lunch then if you don't want us to go to the bar." And he's like, "Okay." And then the boss seems like he's kind of focused on what he's doing, and they go, "Well, we're just going to go have lunch at that bar." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, go wherever you want."
yeah. But what's great is that the way the actor is playing that, the way their boss is playing it, he's well aware. He's essentially setting himself up for plausible deniability. The way Adolfo Celli is playing that is that he could say he had no idea that they were doing this by acting the way he is as they leave the room, telling him that they're going to go do it. Yeah.
Right.
Because the movie underlines this by having him pick up the phone to supposedly call to order regular cops to go to this place, and he actually just orders a sandwich.
Right. And the thing I love too about these two characters is that they're so perceptive. They're very good cops.
Yeah.
When they go to that bar, I think it was Tony steps outside and he's just observing everybody outside, and he knows who's spying on them, who may be an undercover cop and who's not, and you can just tell that in his face. I love that about the acting in this.
And there's quite a bit of that, which it speaks to not just the talent of the people involved, but the willingness of the people making the movie to allow those kinds of story elements to be communicated without dialogue. And that shows a good level of trust and ability within the structure of the people making the film. they knew that they could do this, and therefore you end up with a movie that is much more interesting visually, and it tells its story in a way that isn't essentially somebody reading a radio play with pictures. So that
Right.
which is always a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Hey, did you notice too, on a kind of an unrelated note, did you watch this with the subtitles on at all?
Oh, I actually watched it with both the English dub and the English subtitles on because I know they were very different.
They were very different.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to be able to compare and contrast. Overall, I prefer the subtitle, the Italian version, mainly because I think the dialogue is in several places a little bit smarter, but the English dub is pretty acceptable, I think.
Oh, I thought it was very good, and I thought it was interesting too. Though there were sometimes where the subs and the dubs conflicted with each other, like when the boss is ordering a sandwich, and he's like, "What do you have for tap beer? And what do you have on tap?" And then obviously they said they didn't have anything, and I think in one version, I think it was in the dubs. In the dub he says, "Oh, then forget it. I don't want anything." And in the subtitle it says, "Oh, just give me whatever you've got."
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, "Well, which is it?"
And that's just it. Since it's an Italian film, I would default to whatever was in the Italian version. But at the same time, it's one of those moments where you're like, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. The plot didn't hinge on what beer he got.
No, the point of that scene was that he was not calling cops to go there. He knew damn good well these guys were going to go.
Yeah. And one cool scene too, where Fred and Tony, they torch the cars outside of the illegal gambling den, and I just love that. Rather than going in and bust the place up, they just hit them where it hurts.
Yeah. They don't even go inside the place. They just destroy everybody's cars. Yeah.
And the car they took wasn't even theirs. They took one from the impound.
Yeah, and they ended up accidentally burning it too. And they're just like, oh well, I guess we'll take the bus home.
It's like, I just love that carefree attitude that they have. Nothing phases them. They could be in combat with the military and get through it scot-free.
Probably so. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
Shark Bites Podcast. It's the greatest show in history. From the Dorkening Network, hosted by a nerd who's named Patsy. From movie reviews to tips on surviving the coronavirus, Shark Bites has it all. Follow us on Facebook and suggest topics at sharkbitespod@gmail.com. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
And it's funny, in the 70s you had a lot of cop thrillers that showed us that in order to combat the increasing violence, more good guy violence is required. But I think this movie, it just shows us that more violence could be bad in some instances, because these guys are borderline psychotic.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that is the point of a number of these films made in Italy at the time. I think that when you get to certain films like Revolver or Syndicate Sadists or The Big Racket, those are movies that are really kind of trying to tease that idea out of these scripts, tease these out of these storylines, and kind of ask the question about where the society's judgment on how far we should go. How far do you go as a society? What do you countenance as a society in your police force, in your policing of the population, before you've stepped over a line and you're essentially you should just call yourself a dictatorship, because there are some of these movies where people assume a certain level of criminality, and then people get swept up by the police and sometimes killed, who either had marginal connection to this stuff, or coerced. They were being coerced into what they were doing in the first place, so really had no choice, or were completely innocent. And it depends on it depends on the film to see which tack they're going to take on what they're laying out there. But a lot of the time, I think it's fascinating that in this genre, at this time, like I say, the prime time for this, for me, as far as I can see, really is the 1970s,
yeah.
where the idea was to try to present both sides as being questionable, and it's obvious the criminals are questionable, but then there are some films where sometimes the criminals are doing things that may be questionable and could be deemed illegal, but aren't necessarily wrong. And the problem becomes for the cops, how far do you go down the road before you start to think, like these same supposed criminals, that what they're doing isn't necessarily a bad thing. What some of the accomplishments that they're aiming for actually would be a positive thing. And do you then become the person who kind of turns your eye away from the criminal element in this respect? And then how long do you do that before you start turning your eye away from things that you shouldn't have been turning your eye away from? And that really complex, nuanced view of how you have to look at crime and how you treat the criminal element. Those are where some really interesting ideas come about. But for a lot of movies, and this will probably be one of them. Basically, these are action movies, man.
Yeah,
these are there. I mean, there's some ideas in there to chew on if you want to, but if you just want to see a bunch of action, this is your flick, because this is a series of set pieces where just crazy stuff happens.
Oh my God, the pacing in this film is so awesome.
Yes.
From beginning to end, you're on this roller coaster ride.
It flies by, man. It flies.
And speaking to your point that you just made, Lee Van Cleef's character in Talby in Day of Anger, he's got these, lessons that he's teaching Juliana Gemma's character, and the 10th lesson was, once you start killing, you can't stop.
Yeah.
And I think that's, evident here. But I did find, though, or I felt anyways, because they didn't really contradict it in the movie in, Live Like a Cop, that these guys were inherently good.
Yes,
yes. I really felt that they were good guys. They just used extreme measures.
Right. They were good guys, and not just because they were cops, but because although there are definitely means that they use that probably they couldn't justify if they were forced to, but in the instance in which they're using these extreme measures, it's understandable to them and to you as the viewer. As it's probably over the line, but I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
And looking back, like for example, the scene at the end of the motorcycle chase when Fred snaps the guy's neck. When you first watch it, you're like, what the fuck? Why did he do that? But then when you look back at it, it's like, you could see probably in his mind that it was for the greater good. This guy's just going to go out and commit crimes again. Anyways, he's probably going to get off. You might as well just eliminate him now and solve the problem and the paperwork. And he fell and broke his neck. I don't know what happened.
Well, and part of it, I wondered if some of it, if you got him to vocalize it to someone that he completely trusted, it would be he's injured himself so badly here that a smart lawyer is going to be able to get him out of jail in a short space of time because of the injuries that he caused himself. And I'm just not going to abide that.
Yeah. And these guys are so funny, though, too, Fred and Tony, because at the very end, well, first of all, they don't even save the day. The boss saves them.
which I thought, first of all, what an interesting way to kind of pull the rug out from under you as a viewer, because you're wondering if these two guys are going to survive. And, honestly, most of what happens at the end could have happened just fine if they had been at home in bed.
Right. But then they turn around and when they realize that the bomb is on the ship, they just blow it up for anyways. I thought they were going to drag the bodies, put them on the boat, and then blow it up. No, they just blew it up for shits and giggles.
But also, because at that point, and not to sound like I'm casting aspersions on their character, but it's they're going to be the ones writing the report anyway. They can write it up however they want to.
Yeah, that's true. It was just such a great movie, and the one scene that we haven't talked about. Well, there's quite a few, but one of the ones the hostage scene, which I didn't. Did they explain why the bad guys were holding that lady hostage? I didn't really catch that.
No. That's another one of the. We now join this crime already in progress.
Oh, okay.
That's
right.
That we don't know exactly what was going on there, but then the way the scene plays out. And here's the thing, once again, horrible but true. These kinds of events, like what being portrayed in that sequence, they were not unknown at the time. Where criminals would be, they would either try to be getting away from the cops or escaping from a situation where they were afraid they were going to be seen or whatever, and essentially kind of barricade themselves inside someone's house until they felt safe and could come out and go away, or horribly enough, end up in a situation where they're, it's a home invasion, and now you've got the cops outside, and you've got no way out without having, a human shield in front of you. So this was not an uncommon, sad to say, not an uncommon situation at the time. It was not unknown, and from what I've read, there was a particularly famous event of this type in Italy in the early 70s that as soon as you put a scene like this in a movie, an Italian audience is immediately going to know exactly what you're referencing.
Oh, okay. And you could see, too, based on that fact that, the people of Italy were experiencing things like this, you could understand why the scene played out the way it did in this movie, because you got the commissioner who basically was just going to give them the car that they demanded and let them go. And, I took that to be that in the mind of the people, the police are useless. And so you're rooting for these two guys. I mean, I remember watching it on the first time wondering, what are they going to do? How are they going to get this lady out of this situation? And are they going to be able to do it without having her get killed? And they did it. And it was just awesome the way, I think it was Tony who was playing with the car. He pretended to be the car, and then he kept fucking up with the clutch on purpose, just so Fred could sneak in the back way.
Just to drag the time out. Yeah.
That was amazing, and that was definitely a statement on the ineffectiveness of the police and why, almost a justification why a special force would have been needed at that time.
But at the same time, it's very easy to see why the other cops would get pissed off, because, dude, it would have been just as easy for that poor lady to be killed.
Right, that's true.
They were putting her life in danger. There's no way around it. That their actions could have ended up with her dead. So.
Right. It's like a game to them. The whole like life, everything they do is one big game to Fred and Tony.
Yeah, and like I say, the movie is not definitely telling you that's a good thing, and it's also not definitely telling you it's a bad thing.
Right. There's a great scene where you've got the armored car thieves, and of course the armored car is more like an armored Ninja Turtles van. I kept waiting for an actual armored car to show up. I'm like, oh, is that it?
It's what you had in 1975 or 76. Right. That's what it looked like.
But then with silencers, Fred and Tony just basically dispatch all the bad guys like nothing, and then they hop on the bike and drive by like spectators looking at what's going on.
That's actually one of my favorite sequences of the movie, because what it shows is, once again, one of the things we should be clear about is the only reason, even starting with the opening scene right after the opening credits, the only reason these guys are where they are to take care of these crimes as they are committed is they've got a mole inside this larger criminal organization who is telling them, hey, this particular act has been okayed from the bosses and it's going to happen at this place, on this day.
Right.
So they can really lie in wait for these criminals to move and then take them out. And then as the movie progresses, what we see them doing is deciding, we're not going to wait. We're just going to kill them. We're just going to be done with it. And there's a part of you who, when that starts to happen, and that's the scene you're talking about there, where they just strap silencers to their guns and spend some time there before the crime is supposed to go down. They spot the people who are obviously going to be doing what they're going to be doing, and they just kill them. It's a moment of let's just say that the movie is good enough and it's well written enough and played enough that as an audience member, you are perfectly okay with this by that point in the movie.
Right.
You have been pulled onto their side. The moral ambiguity is completely bypassing you in both lanes at that point, because because we now know that's what these people had planned, and guess what? It's not going to happen now.
Yeah. It's so good. I think, didn't Deodato, he played one of the guys coming out of the bank.
Oh, I can't remember. That would not shock me.
Yeah, I guess he's cameoed in almost all of his films, sort of like Hitchcock. So
I do always love it when a director does that. When you get that thing, there are some directors where if they do it, it becomes it becomes distracting if they're well known and if their faces are well known enough. It's like, oh,
right.
look, that's this person or that person. it is a lot of fun. What I kind of almost prefer, I hate to say this, because it's a weird distinction to make. I almost love it when a director cameos in somebody else's movie more.
Yeah.
I think that's more fun. Like there's this hysterical Peter Jackson cameo in someone now I can't remember someone else's film where he looks like this bearded lunatic. and he doesn't have a line of dialogue. He just kind of grunts, and I'm just like, there you go. That's just you being fun. Or the moment in Danny DeVito's movie Hoffa, where he had Tim Burton play a corpse.
Oh, that's right.
I love that. That's great.
Or like Simon Pegg and Nick Frost playing zombies that are chained to the wall in Land of the Dead.
Exactly. Those are the kind. I kind of prefer my filmmaker cameos in other people's movies, because then it's this kind of fun thing where it's like a little bonus inside, built inside the movie for movie nuts.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I did like too about these characters is there were a lot of little just character touches throughout the film that I thought were great, just added to the dimension of the film. Which, like for example, Tony's always swiping a cigarette right out of somebody's mouth. He'll just walk by and just grab the cigarette.
Yep.
Never see him, or hardly ever see him light one up on his own. And then they always have this thing when they walk into the secretary, they'll swipe the flower that's been delivered to the front, that's sitting in the front, and they'll fight.
Yeah.
If one's trying to get there before the other, so they can grab the flower and pretend that they brought it into her.
And it never works. I think they try it twice.
Yeah.
And each time she's like, "Why don't you go put that back out on the
desk?" Right. Oh man. So I have to say, what a great movie. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about this film that our audience should know?
Well, I always like to do this when I start talking about a genre that people may, a genre of film that is kind of separated by time or distance in some way from the kinds of things that a more modern audience, a podcasting audience maybe, might be paying attention to. For instance, what I would say about this is that if you're interested, because you either heard us talking about this movie and it sounds intriguing, or you've just heard about these wild 70s crime movies from Europe, I always like to try to point out what would be a good starting point. Now, this film actually would be a good starting point. This is a good example of the genre if you've never encountered it before. This is a good one to start with. But there are a number of, we mentioned a lot of them along the way. My mistake of crediting one actor in Almost Human as another character. Trust me, Tomas Milian is also capable of playing a sleazy, greasy scumbag. Wait, just as well as anyone else, including Henry Silva.
Right.
But, if you're looking for a good example, this is one. Once again, I'd point people to movies like The Big Racket or the Revolver is another one. I think I've already mentioned that one before. Any of the Fernando de Leo movies that he directed, any of the crime movies that he directed, most especially Caliber 9, which I think is phenomenal. Syndicate Sadists is a good one. It's a nice kind of, not to beat this idea to death, but it's kind of a nice sleazy and grimy one. That's one of the things that you'll if you start watching a number of these, one of the things you'll notice really easily is that there are some that are that could almost be considered the types of movies that Italy might export, and would be considered the kind of movie that might even get nominations for awards.
Wow.
There really are. There are some movies of that type. Things that almost fall into this category. Things like Suspicious Death of a Minor, or Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, which kind of are part of this genre, but are a little more lofty in their goals. They're not as down and dirty and gritty. And then you have movies like this, which are kind of gritty. They're kind of striding the line. And then you get into movies like, what's a good example? Revolver is almost an art film at times. Revolver is a beautiful movie, but when you start getting into Violent Naples or The Violent Professionals, things like that, you're starting to talk about movies that, or like Rico, the Mean Machine, which is which has an on-screen castration of a character. I mean, you're starting to get into some nasty stuff, and it's a question of what you're willing to enjoy. If you want to see the harsher stuff, it's there. What there really needs to be is like a long list of. Are you just wanting to see an interesting police procedural made in the 70s in Italy? Here's a list.
Yeah.
Are you wanting to see something that's a little too violent? Maybe a little too violent? Here's a list. Are you wanting to see something that feels like that when you're done, you've been rolling around in a gutter and kind of putting filthy water into your eyes? Okay, here's a list for that as well. And so the joy of this little genre or subgenre is that there are a lot of different flavors in it, and some of them are sweet, some of them are bitter, and some of them will make you think that you might have to throw up. So,
right, or go take a shower.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely something here where showering is going to be on your mind.
Yeah, I love discovering new genres like this. Like I was marginally aware that these kind of films were out there, but it wasn't until we really got into it today that I'm like, okay, there's a whole new genre now I got to dive into and enjoy.
Well, like I say, this would be a good jumping off point. If you want to see a film that might be more a more natural step forward for an American audience, at least, let me recommend one of my absolute favorites of this genre at all. It's called Violent City. I think I mentioned it earlier.
Yep.
It's directed by Sergio Solima, who I think made a lot of really great films. And the reason it's probably an easier step into the genre is it's not super violent, but it stars Charles Bronson and Telly Savalas. And,
okay.
It was even mostly shot in New Orleans. It is an excellent example of this kind of movie. It is also, in my opinion, one of the best crime films of the 1970s, regardless of nation of interest. I mean, this is, I don't care what country you start talking about. I think Violent City fits perfectly well into this. Its main character is an assassin, and you're kind of wallowing in the criminal element. It's a simply brilliant movie, and in a lot of ways, you might be upset that all the films that you watch after that won't be quite as good, but it'll at least get you in the door.
Right, exactly, awesome. I wish there was a sequel to this film because I just wanted to play in this universe more.
Oh yeah,
I really wanted to see more of these characters, and that's a testament, I think, to the directing and the acting and the writing.
Especially the writing. Once again, when you have somebody who's this good at writing crime stories, it's really. First of all, the great thing is, if you see this movie, if you choose this one and you see it and you enjoy it, the good news is, the guy who wrote this wrote movies that are just as good as this and better within the same genre. You could feast on this man's work for a solid month.
Nice.
And have a great time the entire time.
That's excellent. Rod, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show here. It's truly been an honor having you. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you online and maybe if you've got any projects coming up?
Well, let's see. Different projects coming up. We've got a couple of my partner in crime, Troy Gwen and I. We're continuing. We're moving into our 11th year of the Naschycast. We don't churn out as many episodes as we used to, mainly because we've gone through most of Paul Naschy's films, and now we're just inviting on other people to talk about Paul Naschy because Lord knows we've done it enough. We're going to have Sam Deegan joining us for a second time to talk about a couple of Paul Naschy films that she's linking because they have portrayals of the devil in them. Kind of get a little bit of a dig into exactly what kinds of satanic portrayals Naschy found interesting. He was putting on screen during his heyday.
Nice.
Troy and I are continuing over on the Bloody Pit podcast. He and I are continuing our ongoing series, working our way through all of the Universal horror films that were made in the 1940s, the ones that often get short shrift because lower budgets and stronger censorship, and the idea that a lot of these movies were produced for a younger audience, which is true, but that doesn't make these films less interesting to talk about. So we're digging back into that, and on the Naschycast, actually, here in the near future, the next couple of months, one of the few Naschy films that we've not talked about before because it's a terrible movie. we've actually found a very interesting way to not kill ourselves talking about this particular movie. It's called Shadows of Blood, and it is a shot-on-video film from the late 80s that nobody has anything good to say about it because there's nothing good to say about it. It's a movie we've put off for, at this point, 11 years because every time we thought about doing it, we just got depressed. But we've actually found a way. We're going to finally cover Shadows of Blood later this year. So if you're intrigued by just how in the hell we can finally find a way to not cry for an entire podcast when discussing that movie, we have found it, folks. We have found it.
That's great.
We do have a couple more commentary tracks that are slated to come out later this year. Can't quite make public announcements about them as such, but if you're attuned to what's coming out on Blu-ray from certain boutique labels here soon, you probably figure out what commentary tracks we have in the hopper. I'm sure there are other projects, but I can't. If you want to, the jumping off point for all of these things is going to be my blog over there, the Bloody Pit or the Bloody Pit of Rod. Search for that; you'll find it pretty easily. And you'll be able to find both podcast streams there. We are always up to something, and it's usually not anything that you want to stare too directly at for too long.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much once again for joining us, and hopefully we can have you back on the show in the future to talk about other fun films.
I'd be glad to, man. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of Then Is Now Podcast, and we encourage you to check out Rod's podcasts, the Naschycast, and The Bloody Pit, as well as his blog, The Bloody Pit of Rod, and his numerous Blu-ray film commentaries. Rod Barnett is truly one of the great podcasters of our time. As always, his various web links will be in the show notes. Remember, you can send your feedback to thenisnow42@gmail.com. You can also join in the conversation at our Facebook Then Is Now Podcast group. Then Is Now Podcast is a proud member of the Dorkening Podcast Network, so please be sure to check out the other great shows there at thedorkening.com. You can also visit our website at havenpodcasts.com, where you'll find our sister show, The East Meets the West, in which we discuss Shaw Brothers films and spaghetti western movies. And Then Is Now is on YouTube, so please visit youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1 to get the latest videos as well as other fun videos. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and also share the video versions of our podcast with your friends and get them to subscribe as well. Don't forget to go wherever you download your podcast from and leave us a great review so that more listeners can find us. You can find us on all the podcasting apps, especially the big three, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Class dismissed.
Then Is Now Podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.
For more shows like the one you just heard, check out the Dorkening Podcast Network at thedorkening.com.